Beyond the City by Arthur Conan Doyle. The newcomers. "If you please, mum," said the voice of a domestic from somewhere round the angle of the door, "number 3 is moving in." Two little old ladies who were sitting at either side of a table sprang to their feet with ejaculations of interest and rushed to the window of the sitting room. "Take care, Monica dear," said one, shrouding herself in the lace curtain. "Don't let them see us." "No, no, Bertha, we must not give them reason to say that their neighbors are inquisitive, but I think that we are safe if we stand like this." The open window looked out upon a sloping lawn, well trimmed and pleasant, with fuzzy rose bushes and a star-shaped bed of sweet william. It was bounded by a low wooden fence, which screened it off from a broad modern new metalled road. At the other side of this road were 3 large detached deep-bodied villas with peaky eaves and small wooden balconies, each standing in its own little square of grass and of flowers. All 3 were equally new, but numbers 1 and 2 were curtained and sedate, with a human, sociable look to them, while number 3, with yawning door and unkempt garden, had apparently only just received its furniture and made itself ready for its occupants. A 4-wheeler had driven up to the gate, and it was at this that the old ladies, peeping out bird-like from behind their curtains, directed an eager and questioning gaze. The cabman had descended, and the passengers within were handing out the articles which they desired him to carry up to the house. He stood red-faced and blinking, with his crooked arms outstretched, while a male hand, protruding from the window, kept piling up upon him a series of articles, the sight of which filled the curious old ladies with bewilderment. "My goodness me!" cried Monica, the smaller, the drier, and the more wizened of the pair. "What do you call that, Bertha? It looks to me like 4 batter puddings." "Those are what young men box each other with," said Bertha, with a conscious air of superior worldly knowledge. "And those?" 2 great bottle-shaped pieces of yellow shining wood had been heaped upon the cabman. "Oh, I don't know what those are," confessed Bertha. Indian clubs had never before obtruded themselves upon her peaceful and very feminine existence. These mysterious articles were followed, however, by others which were more within their range of comprehension, by a pair of dumbbells, a purple cricket bag, a set of golf clubs, and a tennis racket. Finally, when the cabman, all top-heavy and bristling, had staggered off up the garden path, there emerged in a very leisurely way from the cab a big, powerfully built young man, with a bullpup under one arm and a pink sporting paper in his hand. The paper he crammed into the pocket of his light yellow dustcoat and extended his hand as if to assist someone else from the vehicle. To the surprise of the 2 old ladies, however, the only thing which his open palm received was a violent slap, and a tall lady bounded unassisted out of the cab. With a regal wave, she motioned the young man towards the door, and then, with one hand upon her hip, she stood in a careless, lounging attitude by the gate, kicking her toe against the wall and listlessly awaiting the return of the driver. As she turned slowly round and the sunshine struck upon her face, the 2 watchers were amazed to see that this very active and energetic lady was far from being in her first youth, so far that she had certainly come of age again since she first passed that landmark in life's journey. Her finely chiseled, clean-cut face, with something red Indian about the firm mouth and strongly marked cheekbones, showed even at that distance traces of the friction of the passing years, and yet she was very handsome. Her features were as firm in repose as those of a Greek bust, and her great dark eyes were arched over by 2 brows so black, so thick, and so delicately curved, that the eye turned away from the harsher details of the face to marvel at their grace and strength. Her figure, too, was straight as a dart, a little portly perhaps, but curving into magnificent outlines, which were half accentuated by the strange costume which she wore. Her hair, black but plentifully shot with gray, was brushed plainly back from her high forehead, and was gathered under a small round felt hat, like that of a man, with 1 sprig of feather in the band as a concession to her sex. A double-breasted jacket of some dark frieze-like material fitted closely to her figure, while her straight blue skirt, untrimmed and ungathered, was cut so short that the lower curve of her finely turned legs was plainly visible beneath it, terminating in a pair of broad, flat, low-heeled and square-toed shoes. Such was the lady who lounged at the gate of number 3 under the curious eyes of her two opposite neighbors. But if her conduct and appearance had already somewhat jarred upon their limited and precise sense of the fitness of things, what were they to think of the next little act in this tableau vivant? The cabman, red and heavy-jowled, had come back from his labors and held out his hand for his fare. The lady passed him a coin. There was a moment of mumbling and gesticulating, and suddenly she had him with both hands by the red cravat which girt his neck, and was shaking him as a terrier would a rat. Right across the pavement she thrust him, and pushing him up against the wheel, she banged his head 3 several times against the side of his own vehicle. "Can I be of any use to you, Aunt?" asked the large youth, framing himself in the open doorway. "Not the slightest," panted the enraged lady. "There, you low blackguard! That will teach you to be impertinent to a lady." The cabman looked helplessly about him with a bewildered, questioning gaze, as one to whom alone of all men this unheard-of and extraordinary thing had happened. Then, rubbing his head, he mounted slowly onto the box and drove away with an up-tossed hand, appealing to the universe. The lady smoothed down her dress, pushed back her hair under her little felt hat, and strode in through the hall door, which was closed behind her. As with a whisk, her short skirts vanished into the darkness. The two spectators, Miss Bertha and Miss Monica Williams, sat looking at each other in speechless amazement. For 50 years they had peeped through that little window and across that trim garden, but never yet had such a sight as this come to confound them. "I wish," said Monica at last, "that we had kept the field." "I am sure I wish we had," answered her sister. Breaking the ice. The cottage from the window of which the Mrs. Williams had looked out stands, and has stood for many a year, in that pleasant suburban district which lies between Norwood, Annerley, and Forest Hill. Long before there had been a thought of a township there, when the metropolis was still quite a distant thing, old Mr. Williams had inhabited the Brambles, as the little house was called, and had owned all the fields about it. 6 or 8 such cottages scattered over a rolling countryside were all the houses to be found there, in the days when the century was young. From afar, when the breeze came from the north, the dull, low roar of the great city might be heard, like the breaking of the tide of life, while along the horizon might be seen the dim curtain of smoke, the grim spray which that tide threw up. Gradually, however, as the years passed, the city had thrown out a long brick feeler here and there, curving, extending, and coalescing, until at last the little cottages had been gripped round by these red tentacles, and had been absorbed to make room for the modern villa. Field by field, the estate of old Mr. Williams had been sold to the speculative builder, and had borne rich crops of snug